Martha greeted Jesus as he came in the door, and immediately went to do what God has called her to do, and that is to serve. Martha's hardwired, to be that servant. And as she's serving, Mary is watching and listening to the teachings of Jesus. The world needs both Marys and Marthas, as I said in the lead up to the gospel. But Martha starts to realize that the work she's doing is also taking her away from something else she wants. She starts to envy, right? She starts to sort of get connected to what's happening in the other room and gets distracted. She gets distracted in two ways. She gets distracted from what she's called, because that's who she is. She's hardwired to be the service person, to care for others through service. Lots of us are wired that way. God has made us that way. Mary is made for a different purpose. She's made to sit at the feet of Jesus and learn. Not everyone is made that way. Some of us are best knowing and growing near to Jesus through service. Some of us are best growing near to Jesus through worship and devotion and prayer and learning. Jesus doesn't admonish the work that she's doing or the person she is. He just redirects her. He gives her a gentle reminder to kind of recognize that her frustration is showing through here. That she's doing what she's called to do, but then she's envying something happening in the other room and losing sight of what she is called to do. So there's a kind of gentle reminder Jesus gives her to kind of recognize, to sort of stay on the road, kind of stay in the lane in which she's called to be. That what she's doing by the service part is just as important. Even though Jesus says that this other portion is what's needed and says that this won't be taken away from Mary, he's pointing out that that's what Mary is made for. And so there's an important balance that's coming about in this text. And the bigger distraction from Martha is noticed in that frustration that wells up with her as she kind of envies what's happening in the other room. Some of you, my car has this lane assist thing, right? You know what I'm talking about? Where if I've got my hands on the wheel and my car drifts out of the lane, my steering wheel will vibrate to tell me to get back in the lane. And it's sort of like this gentle reminder to kind of stay in the lane where you're supposed to be. That's kind of what I hear happening here with this text. That sometimes God will give us, sometimes Jesus will give us this sort of gentle reminder. It's sort of like God's lane assist system kicks in. And we get kind of this gentle reminder that it's okay to be who we are, to fulfill the part of the kingdom we're made to fulfill, and not to envy some other part that other people do. There's a way in which we can find time and balance even for both. And the church needs both. When we get ourselves off balance, we tend to lean one way or the other, and then we get sort of lost in it. And we can run off the road with our churches and with our lives. It's particularly true, when we have a sense of calling and a sense of purpose. Let's say you have a particular job or vocation, and you set off and you're in your lane and you're doing a great job. Let's say you're a teacher. I'll just throw that out because it could be anything. And while you're doing your job, you recognize that someone in your class that wasn't smarter than you, but somehow that person in your class, you notice them on Facebook, and they're making a lot more money than you. And you think to yourself, gosh, how come I'm struggling here with, my teacher's salary, trying to make ends meet with my kids and so forth? I could I could have done something else. You know, I could have been bragging about the trip to Brazil like my friend in high school. And in a moment, you see, we have gotten distracted from what God has called us to do, and now we're over here envying someone else's life. That's what's happening with Martha, right? She's in her lane. She greets Jesus and immediately goes to work doing what she is called to do, and then gets distracted by what Mary is doing and finds envy and starts to lose her cool with it. When we dig deep in our heart and our soul, and we come to realize what God has really put us on earth for, what is it that gives us joy in the presence of Christ? What is it that we are pleased to do and we know that Jesus is pleased with us doing? What is that thing that we are put on this earth for? When we come to grips with that, and then we're heading down that lane and we're enjoying life as it is, and then suddenly we get distracted by someone else's life or someone else doing things, and frustration wells up, and we even consider sort of changing lanes and doing something that we aren't made for simply because maybe more money is the thing or more status is the thing. It becomes a selfish thing now. And we start to get distracted and we lose sight of that purpose that God put us here for, that truly brings us and God joy. But we can get distracted by so many things. And so today's text is not an admonition against those who are servers like Martha. Today's text is an admonition against distractions from our call, from what God gives us to do based on the way God has made us. For we have a holy and righteous purpose in this world. To be able to share and love God and love our neighbors through the gifts that God has given to us is a holy, sanctifying purpose. And when we are living our lives through that window, there's a fulfillment that fills our soul. And so Jesus says, no, I'm not going to take that away from Mary. But he doesn't also tell Martha that it's not available for her with the work she does. It's the same true for us. And I think it's also worth thinking about it in more of the collective model too. That when churches start to look at other churches, oh, I wish I had a program like that church down the street, then we would have a whole lot of new members. Things like that. When we start to envy other congregations, when we look at it collectively and we say to ourselves, oh, if only we had a pastor like that church. That was a joke, folks. Totally bombed. I think it was the delivery. I caught you in a moment when you were all distracted, didn't I? Yeah. When we look at other churches and we start, as a collection now, and we start to envy, and then we say to ourselves, if only, as soon as that if only surfaces within our heart and soul, no matter what it is, as soon as that if only comes up, if only I had this, or if only we had that, or did that. Friends, whenever that if only wells up inside you, check that right against God's will and purpose for your life. Check that against what you're really made for, that God put you here for. Right? Because that if only is a challenge to that. Some of us, the godly call, I can tell you, Danielle, my wife, the godly call for her is to be a mom. She's great at it, right? She's great at it. She has a job, she's employed, and she loves her work, but that is not her holy call. That is to be a mom. She's good at it. Okay? And I know that when she gets distracted and frustrated, it's for the same sort of things that we're talking about today. So Jesus today gives us a kind of lane assist, right? A gentle kind of vibration on the steering wheel to remind us to stay in our lane because there's great joy in it. And ultimately, staying in our lane, following God's lead, we end up heading down the road that is a fulfilling life. That in the end of that life, we find out that we have touched so many lives by the grace and love of God that money and status and all those distractions didn't really matter after all. May God bless you with that. Amen.